Okay, well, thank you for the introduction. And just like you heard, my name is Lindsey Halman. I'm the Executive Director of Up for Learning, and I'm here with my colleagues, Anna, Mira, and Harry. And we are all in Vermont right now, and really excited to be with you all to talk about YouthAdult Partnership. And we hope that this next hour or so, hour or less, will be interactive and helpful as you think about the why, the what, and the how of YouthAdult Partnership. So we're going to begin by taking you through a metaphor that's going to really unpack the why it's important. And we're going to be taking you through the story that we like to call Nourishing the Seed. And we use this metaphor as a way to consider the conditions that need to be established in order for YouthAdult Partnership to truly flourish in an educational setting, in an organization, or in a community. As we go through this continuum, you might have seen other continuums before. We really think of it as a continuum, but it's not linear. So, there might be various examples of different stages of partnership that you have experienced before, or you might be wondering, well, how do I get there? Don't worry, because we're going to support you in thinking about that throughout our workshop with you. So I'm turning it over to, who am I turning it over to? Is it you, Anna? Mira?
Yeah, so the sun represents youth voice and agency. This is basically kind of representing like youth's contribution to kind of the seed to tree like process. And because without youth and adult partnership, it's like youth voice needs to be there to have youth and adult partnership, or else it's just adults. So youth voice is kind of what youth bring to the table, and how like the youth voice and yeah, kind of just adding, just so the youth voice is through all the stages of youth adult partnership.
Thank you, Mira. And I just put it in the chat, so you'll have the visual in the chat. And just like Mira said, when you need to have the light, the rays of the sun that truly has that belief in youth voice and agency, but you also, for anybody who's ever planted a seed or likes to garden, you need to have the soil conditions that have the right nutrients, a healthy soil, a healthy culture, a healthy climate, to ensure that this seed is truly going to grow into a full mature tree. Sometimes there is that belief in youth voice and agency, but the soil might be toxic, right? There might be elements within that organization or in a school that are not going to allow that seed to fully mature into a fruiting tree. So we really need to think about the ecological conditions in this metaphor, the soil and the sun, to truly get to our full mature tree.
Awesome, thank you. And then for our first kind of stage on this continuum, we have the seed. So in this stage, also known as youth as recipients, so in this stage, adults inform and or direct youth, and ideally adults will support youth expression and actively listen to youth, but decisions are generally done to and for youth. And so the seed obviously has the potential to grow into this wonderful, like, flourishing tree, but it's not quite there yet, and not all the provided nutrients are there in that situation. So to help people kind of visualize this, we have an example, a metaphor that will continue adding on to throughout the different stages. But so in this youth as recipient stage, we're going to use the metaphor of a mural. So an example would be students are told directly by their teacher that they're going to paint a mural in their school this year. It's part of a unit on climate justice. And so in this example, the youth are not actively designing the mural or having any specific say on what should be a part of it. But it's everything is adult initiated. But adults ideally will still listen to youth voice and their opinion on the mural. So yeah, and I'll pass it over to Harry.
Thanks, Anna. So the next stage in the evolution of this partnership tree is when the seed sprouts and becomes a seedling. And this is really a stage with adults are really beginning to recognize that young people's opinions are critical to the work they're doing together, to the learning, making decisions that are really meaningful to everybody involved. So adults are listening more during this period, recognizing these new roles that begin to emerge for young people. And I think at the same time, there's a sense of responsibility because just like Lindsey and Mira and Anna have talked about, there are all these conditions that are in motion all the time. So it really is paying attention to the conditions and taking care of that seedling, that sprout. And I was thinking about this spring as I planted for my garden and how spectacular it is when the seed kind of breaks through the soil. And at the same time, realizing, wow, it's this incredibly powerful living plant and it's going to become an enormous tree. And it's also really delicate in ways. So there's a really important dynamic here of adults paying attention, responding, listening. And the example to take Anna's example of the mural. So what does this look like in that scenario? So this could be a situation where, the teacher really sees this image of a mural, but recognizes, look, I need to recognize that young people have a voice and what is this going to look like? So here's some ideas, here's some choices, and inviting young people into that decision making. So they become consultants in this next stage of their growth as true partners. I'll pass it over to Mira.
Yes, and our next stage is the sapling, which is youth and adults as emerging partners. And then, so this kind of means youth are actively participating in decision making, in the decision making process that is designed and guided by adults. So youth are getting a voice, definitely, but still the process is brought to them from adults. And usually at this stage, characteristics of the tree start being defined, like flexible trunk. So this kind of relates to flexible mental models, because the mental model, your mental model will change from the seed and then the mature tree. The sapling grows stronger when subjected to the elements, so challenges, but also appreciates protection and support, like advocacy for youth and adult partnership. A new and deeper root system creates involving stability and strength. And kind of like, so back to the example, the teacher discusses with youth the possibility of painting a mural in the entryway of the school as part of their climate justice unit. The youth like this idea and agree to brainstorm mural designs that creatively express their learning. Youth then asked to attend a faculty meeting after school to discuss the project and present 3 design choices to staff for feedback. So in that, the teacher brings the idea of painting a mural in the entryway, but the students are able to give their feedback and they're able to have their create mural designs, but the adult first brings up the mural and doesn't really leave that up to youth decision making. And I'm going to pass it on to Anna.
Great, thank you. And then our last kind of stage on this continuum is youth and adults as full partners. And in this stage, you have a mature tree that's obviously flourishing. When a tree becomes mature, it starts producing fruits or flowers, depending on what kind of plant it is. And this is when the tree has really reached it's at its most productive, and it has a really strong foundation. So with the roots, and everything is really developed, and as a result of the strong foundation, other things like the fruits and the plants and the other flowers can grow off of it, and really flourish. And so obviously this is not where it ends, right? This is just really building a strong foundation to work off of and continue work with youth and adult partnerships. And in continuing this metaphor, during a unit on climate justice, youth brainstorm a variety of ways to demonstrate their learning with each other, and youth work in partnership with teachers and adults to make a decision about what the mural is going to include, what it's going to look like, as well as youth plan a community meeting to discuss climate justice actions such as a mural and other ways to really demonstrate the learning. So it's not adult facilitated or initiated. It's really a true partnership where everyone is getting to participate in conversation and share ideas with one another.
So we want to give you an opportunity to think about yourself, your work, your community, your school, your organization in the context of this metaphor, sort of this growing partnership that has so many moving parts and such a dynamic relationship involved. So we want to take time in small breakout groups, and we have some questions that we want you to think through, share with each other, and then when we all return, and I think we're going to take, is it 10 minutes in the breakout session, Lindsey? Yeah. And that'll give us a few minutes when we return from the breakouts to share a takeaway. So one thing you can be, we'd like you to think about and share when you come back is something that really stood out from your conversation, the presentation, your own thinking. So I think we have on the next slide the questions and some guidance for the small groups, because what we're asking is that one person, or it could be several people, sort of step into the role of facilitator and really make help provide some structure so that everybody has a voice in this breakout conversation. But our suggestions are to start with brief introductions to give everybody a chance to say their name, add their pronouns if they'd like, where they are, and one word about partnership to get started. And then we have these further questions that really ask you to dig in further. Why is this important? Why are we taking the time to talk about it? Again, where would you place yourself, your school, your organization, and why are you there? What's it like to think about your school or organization this way, and what can you take away for your work, for your thinking, and to share with us when you return? We also on the slide have the norms for today's session as a way of just sort of revisiting those to continue our efforts to hold those up and do our best to fulfill them. So I think that's all I was going to say. Is there anything else from the facilitation group to add before we move to breakouts?
I don't think so. I'm going to put all that in the chat right now. Hopefully that's all there. So introductions, 10 minutes. We'll do 10 minutes on the breakouts. Does that sound, Anna or Mira, anything else you want to add? And we also put in the chat the visual as well. So there's a link, I'll put that back in there, to the seed to tree metaphor visual, so you can actually pop that up there during your conversation or have it up on your screen. Hang on one second here. There we go. And I'm going to open up the breakout rooms now. There'll be about 5 or 6 people in each room, so you please start with introductions. We'll come back to these rooms for another part of our workshop today, so you'll get to know some folks a little bit better. And I'm going to just put 10 minutes on the timer, and they should open.
Hi. Okay, I'm going to apologize because they decided to mow right outside my house today. So I'm going to mute myself in just a minute, but I'm Kay and I live in Iowa. And yeah, go ahead.
I'm Tamar and I live in Boston.
My name is Brennan. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I live in Roanoke, Virginia. I believe it said it wanted us to say a word that had to do with partnership. So my word would be collaboration.
Thank you for that reminder.
I'm Ian. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from Lake St. Louis, Missouri. And a word I would use to describe partnership is essential.
Hi, I'm Griffin. I live in Klamath Falls, Oregon. And my word would be agency. And that means if there's 30 kids, sorry, I said the word again, 30 students and one adult, then 30 students have more of a voice than the one adult. That's what agency means, right?
Dr. Moore, are you on or are you taking a break?
I'm sorry, I had to step away for a moment, but
That's okay. We're talking about youth adult partnering and what an essential word would be for you to describe a partnership.
You said a word to describe partnership. I guess the first word that comes to my mind is collaboration, being able to come together and make something happen.
Nice.
Thank you.
So, Brennan, would you like to start us out on the question about why is youth adult partnership important?
Sure, yeah, I'd love to. I, of course, agree that student and adult partnership is very important. And to emphasize that, I'll say that the reason why it's important is that we need to learn to work together as adults and students to get anything done, and especially the students. We sort of need each other in a lot of ways, because for the students to enjoy anything that the adults are going to do, the adults have to be actively working with the students. And same thing with the students. They're really not going to, have a good time if the adults aren't listening to them, which they need to be doing. And I think that things like this are helping that as time goes on.
Thanks. Does anybody else want to take that one? We've got a bunch of questions, but. Okay, let's. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I'll just speak quickly. I think it's incredibly important because I think that oftentimes adults who when they are in power and it's adults have the power, as we learned earlier, they often forget what it's like to be a young person, and they completely forget, and they often don't care or want to listen, and so I think it's just so important. And adults often forget that the youth are the next people to be doing things, and if we're shutting them down, then they're just going to continue doing the same thing for the generation after them, and then change won't happen. So it's just this cyclical issue of not listening to youth who see the bull in the world and are trying to change it, and want to. And then if we don't listen, then nothing's going to change.
Thanks.
Yeah, to kind of go off of that. Oh, sorry.
Absolutely. That's okay.
I think that bridge is super important between youth and adults, because I feel like we really saw it this past year with COVID. The adults really needed to listen to the students, because the students were the ones who were actually experiencing this for the first time. adults and like our parents haven't gone through a pandemic in school, you know, and so I think that bridge was just super important there, for students to communicate to like educators on how they felt in their school environments, and how also on the flip side to educators to students. I feel like it was important for them to communicate like what they needed from their students as well.
Can I be a dissenting voice here? I don't
Sure.
think I don't think that young people need as much supervision and guidance as is commonly accepted. And I think the Lord of the Flies myth has been proven incorrect, that children do just quite well learning how to socialize best when they're left to their own devices. That's just one example. So although I think we need to be there for them whenever it's called on, but I don't think it's as important as it's not everything it's cracked up to be.
And I sort of agree. I think where I see the difference is that there are some things, and it's, you know, I work primarily in schools. And there are, I see the adult role in many cases to affirm and to get the barriers out of the way. And in most situations, if there isn't an adult ally, even if it's the decision maker they go to, that becomes an adult ally that says, yes, go for it. But just to get those barriers out of the way. And then I agree with you. I just think a lot of times the systems we have in place prohibit creativity, innovation, building agency, identity. And so, you know, I feel strongly that adults have to really work on the system, and then have the youth have the freedom to grow as they can. Shall we go to another question? Okay, so where would you place your school, organization, whatever role you want to place yourself in, on that seed to tree? Where do you think you are?
I can go first. I think we're youth as consultants. I think there is an unfortunate amount of like tokenizing with our students, and saying like, oh, here, look at what this student said, it's good, like our organization is great. When like there's a lot of other things that we could do a lot better. And one thing I think that we're also kind of grappling with is working with our current students versus working with our alumni, because we're an after school program, we're a nonprofit. And so we're trying really hard to engage our alumni who are also youth, and they're like up to, I don't know, 25, 26 now. So bringing our alumni in as equal partners, and our current students as more consultants, and seeing like how that goes. And then once the like hopefully the tokenization ends, after I like push more, then we can like continue to grow.
So I work at a nonprofit, and we have multiple youth programs, and we are in the process of completely transforming them. And the reason why I'm here is because I want for our youth to have the voice in our programs. While we're making these changes, we want to, it's only 8 seconds left. So we just want to really just incorporate them in the change. So that's why I'm here.
Hi, everyone. Okay. In the chat, I know more groups are going to come, or maybe that's everyone. In the chat, it would be great. We want all of you to kind of think about the cedar tree metaphor that we kind of explained, and then your breakout room discussion, and answer the question, what can you take away from this activity to help your school or organization? So you can all put that in the chat. The importance of listening and relating to one another, using less hierarchical language.
Yeah, I want to just lift that one up. We at Up for Learning, we don't use the teacher student. I know this is the student voice summit, but we use youth because automatically we create power dynamics with those words. We put each other in different boxes and silos with teacher and student. And so really, I think going back to the comment before about the importance of listening, relating to one another as human beings, right? And not putting us into categories.
Yeah, and I think that was something that was in the norms as well, kind of not saying kids or like old people or like kind of just, yeah, definitely.
I really like this one, students as treating students as humans first. Right, I think it goes both ways to young people and adults, right? We're people first.
Yeah.
I see. One thing I took away was that more often than not, schools are willing to give students somewhat of a voice. However, the chances of them owning up to said voice are lower than they should be. Yeah. And I think, that there is a continuum and we also try to make it really clear that all students, all people have a voice, and it's giving folks the opportunity to be able to use their voice in a way that allows for positive change in a school and allows for them to really be who they are in their full humanity. So, but I do think that's right, Brennan, around we have a student voice group or whatever it is, but are we really owning up to that, to that?
Yeah, and one other one, just to think out loud about this one, about a place where you had, I guess it's Lynn, good input around whose voice is heard in systems of discipline and behavior expectations. And it makes me think about the restorative work that we've been partnering with school districts around. And it's so much of a culture change. It certainly has to do with discipline and behavior. And it just has so much to do with how our relationships with each other, youth and adult.
Thank you all. I know the conversation was probably too short, and keep adding to the chat. I'm going to turn it over to Anna to wrap this segment before we move into some examples of what this can look like.
Great, thank you all. Thank you for your participation in the chat. It's great to see. And so just as a little summary of what we've done in this part of our presentation, we know that once the norms and strong foundation of youth and adult partnerships have been established and developed, the possibilities and potential for youth and adult partnerships and everything that comes from it increase tenfold and are amplified. And of course, in this process, there's bound to be mistakes and perhaps being uncomfortable at first with the shifting of a paradigm that has kind of boxed us in for a really long time, and the shifting of power dynamics between youth and adults. But this just makes it that much clearer that we need a clear language and ways to talk about the evolution of partnerships and the shifting of roles. So our hope from this is that you'll take this diagram with you and be able to use it as a resource and apply it to your own organizations or schools, and use it as a reference point in your journey. And as just one last thing to emphasize, as though we've been calling it a continuum, This whole process is not always linear, right? I think maybe perhaps in some of your breakout rooms, you maybe discussed how one part of your school or organization is maybe in one part on the continuum, while your school or organization as a whole is on a different part. So just an emphasis that different places within your schools or organizations can be in different places in this diagram. Yeah, so thank you all. And now we're going to move on to the possibilities of what can come out of youth and adult partnerships.
Thanks, Anna. So I'm going to just share my screen. I will unpin you. Let's see. So you don't have to be in the spotlight. So just like Anna said, we're going to move into some examples because you just have been able to look at kind of the continuum and the why behind partnership. And the first question that we asked actually in the breakout rooms when you're introducing yourself is a word to describe partnership. And I imagine that most of those words were positive and uplifting and strengths-based, like valued and heard and joyful. And so that really is at the why. But there's so many different opportunities for partnership. And so we wanted to provide kind of like a mini panel right now with a number of different examples. So we're going to start with a short video from iGen about the power of partnership just around relationship building, intergenerational connections and relationships. And I believe that this video will speak for itself. So this will be our first kind of panel presentation. And then we're going to share from Up for Learning, Anna and Mira, Harry, and myself, about what does it mean to co-create and co-lead an organization. And then we'll hear about an educational partnership model in Roanoke. So there'll be 3 kind of 5-minute panel presentations, and then we're going to move into, okay, so how do I get there? So that's where we're going here, but I'm going to start us off with our iGen video.
Lindsey, I'm not sure if it's just me, but I can't hear the audio. I don't know if you shared your audio when you shared your screen.
Thank you, Anna. Let me see. Are you hearing me?
Yep.
Okay. Let me give it another try.
Lindsey, I'd suggest stop share, and then when you start to share over on the left-hand side, it says share sound.
Okay, let me see. Sure, thank you. I'm using a different computer, so I'm a little bit off my game here.
That's
and we'll
okay.
start it over. We're going to start over. Here we go. Take 2. And let me know if you have issues.
First of all, Zoom is a perfect platform and it worked great. And I was very impressed how you did. I haven't, as much as I Zoomed the last year, I haven't learned how to do those breakout rooms where we had like our own little teams. That was the first time I've done that. I thought that was really cool, and I need to learn how to manage that myself. It felt like having fun with you guys was like having fun with my own kids that I don't have.
The most. Oh my gosh, hands down. I love the intergenerational games that we've done online. In particular, the time on Valentine's Day that we had a special Jeopardy opportunity to play with people across the state, old, young. It was so much laughter. There was just great camaraderie. And that was absolutely my favorite part.
You guys didn't treat us like, the old people. It was you treated us, we were welcomed to the table as equals, not as, you know, the old people don't know things.
I have had just such a renewal of hope about what our next generation is going to be able to do, and just the whole feeling about our future. And after participating in a lot of the iGen activities, it really struck me how deeply this generation is thinking about issues, how compassionate and how thoughtful this generation is about how to proceed forward.
Back about 15 years ago, there's a person from the Department of Education that I truly admired. She did a wonderful job, and she had recently retired. And it was so much fun seeing her on our paths have not crossed in 15 years, yet I admire her a lot. And being able to be on iGen with her meant a lot to me. It was like we were, so that was an added bonus to being there. It's not really different generations, but it's a bonus to be. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, that was another thing I meant to compliment on. I was impressed at how clever the questions were. They weren't too hard. They weren't too easy. It was well done, created questions.
Well, no, I think it's very important for younger people to connect with older people, because older people have a lot of experience and information they would like to share with the younger people to help the younger people walk down life's road a little easier, so they don't get into a lot of trouble that the older people might have gotten into. You understand? All the mishaps and mistakes that some of us older people make. We try to talk to the younger people to help them avoid them making those same mistakes.
So I come at it kind of with like two different perspectives. One is from my own background, to the Latin community that I grew up in, multiple generations sitting at the table were a really important part of who we were. I think in the United States we've lost that in many ways. We forget sometimes that we are the product of our parents and our grandparents and those who came before them. And if we don't know those stories, if the story of how my grandparents, came to Guatemala, for example, or what they, what courtship was like when they were dating each other, and those storytelling is an art, and it's one that I think we lose. And I see iGen as an important way to go back to that, to hear. Listening becomes an important part of the skills that we need to have, so that I can understand you and understand where you're coming from, and you can understand where I'm coming from. And the only way we do that is by listening and listening to the stories, because stories tell it not just the facts, but the feelings. And that becomes really important. And that's why I think this is such an important endeavor.
So thank you to iGen for sharing that video as an example around building those intergenerational relationships and the importance of just having conversation and play and joy together. I'm now going to pass it to my partners in my organization, Mira, Anna, and Harry, to just talk about organizationally, what does youth adult partnership look like when it's really acted on both internally and externally within an organization. So I will pin you all and so people can see you. There's Harry. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll jump in with a brief story. One of the steps in many of in the work we do with teams is to bring groups together to really get to know the work and each other. And we always partner with youth co-facilitators. So we're adult youth teams. And I had my slides drafted for training, and my youth co-facilitator, in a very gentle and caring way, said, "Oh, Harry, those really need a lot of help." And she took the slides and really made them kind of just so much more engaging. And it was one of those moments where I just was so appreciative of my youth partner. So that was the first story that came to mind when I thought about what it looks like in my work.
Anna, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I can jump in. I don't think that I have a specific story. I guess a little context for me personally. So I'm a rising senior this year in high school, but I started doing work with UP in my freshman year when I participated with my school in transforming school culture through restorative practices, an initiative which was actually facilitated by Lindsey. And then at our final workshop, I think it was, she asked if anyone was interested in being a co-facilitator. And so that was really like the beginning of my journey with UP, I guess. And then this year I signed on to be a co-facilitator, and I continued to be working in transforming school culture through restorative practices, the initiative, which is a bit of a mouthful, but I continued to be able to work with another co-facilitator and an employee at UP this year, virtually with middle school. And so now I've been doing it for 2 years, I guess, which is kind of interesting to think about. But I think really one of the biggest things that stands out to me about working with UP is like the constant learning and opportunities for learning from, of course, my adult partners, but also my other youth partners that I'm working with. And I think we're all learning from each other all the time. And, whenever we have meetings, whether they're mostly planning or our youth advisory council meetings, it's a constant, conversation where it doesn't feel like there are power dynamics at play. So this next coming year, I'm doing a bit of co-teaching with some of my teachers at school, at my own school. And, as we're planning for that, I'm just sometimes just realizing how much I sometimes take for granted my partnership with with everyone at UP, because I'm having to like talk a lot more and work a lot harder to have like my voice heard as much. And so, yeah, really it's just been an amazing experience. And so I'll pass it over to Mira now.
Yeah, I think some things for me, I feel like for Up for Learning, it's really interesting because our mission is basically youth and adult partnership, but it feels like as an organization, we have that at play constantly. And I think it's really kind of like, it goes for any organization that is like encouraging or advocating for one thing within the organization. There should be advocacy for whatever they're advocating for. And I just think because that we inside Up for Learning, we are rooting for youth and adult partnership, even our how we organize meetings, how we like have meetings, they all kind of fall into that and try to like honor that. And I think specifically some things that we do are like making Up for Learning the meetings and like the retreats as accessible as possible, whether it's, I think it being on Zoom was a really like thing like that, like I feel like it made it so much more accessible because no matter where we were, we could always jump on a Zoom. I think that also we always like made sure everything worked for our schedules. Like there'd always be like a scheduling poll for whatever meeting that we have. And I feel like that's been really, really nice. So we could all be on the same page and everything worked for us. And we also didn't have to like sacrifice anything that we were doing for Up for Learning. And I think that as like we could still be, you know, like students. And I feel like that like we didn't necessarily need to give anything up. And we can also choose how much engagement we wanted to put in Up for Learning, whether we just wanted to go to like the monthly youth advisory council meetings, or you know, help out with like, and there was always honestly, there's always opportunities that are like being emailed to us that we can choose to be in or not, which I feel like is amazing, and like really kind of just, it kind of meets us where we want to be, and we don't really need to like change anything to be part of it. And we can do exactly like, we can be as like involved as we want. And I feel like that's just like, I feel like I'm really grateful for that.
I'm just going to add, like, thank you, Mira and Anna and Harry. I'm just going to add a couple pieces to that. And then we'll move to our final example here before we get to the how. Organizationally, we are a nonprofit that works with schools across the state of Vermont and across the country and world, because we've worked with schools outside of the US, and on supporting their youth and adults in reimagining and transforming education. And Mira and Anna are both co-facilitators with us in our year-long programming, but they're also members of our Youth Advisory Council, which is truly a council that advises our own mission and our own operations as an organization. We also have youth who are members of our board of directors. So we really believe that if we are an organization that supports Youth Adult Partnership, it has to be part of every aspect of our organization. And that youth, just like Mira was saying, like, being a student is a full-time job, and therefore all these different opportunities need to be presented in a way that both can fit within a young person's schedule, but also help them move towards their own goals for the future. So we also compensate our youth for all of their co-facilitation and time that they do work with Up for Learning. In Vermont, we have proficiency-based graduation requirements. So we support our youth in making sure that the work that they do with Up can also provide them with the proficiencies towards graduation as well. So compensation is a huge piece of it, and also providing options, opportunities, and choices, and engaging as many youth as leaders as possible. So I just wanted to add those different elements to it. And now we are going to turn to our third example, because I know we're getting short on time. And so I will unspotlight us, and feel free if you have questions about Up for Learning, you can put them in the chat and we can answer them later on. But I'm going to find Rachel. And after I cancel spotlight on us. And Rachel, is there anybody else with you that is presenting?
Yes, Dr. Mcclung.
Okay, awesome. I will let you both introduce yourselves. And as you're introducing yourself, it will help me because I will be able to spotlight you.
Okay. Dr. Mcclung, would you like to go first?
Sure, I can go first. Hi, I'm Jessica Mcclung, and I'm the Assistant Superintendent in Roanoke County Schools in Roanoke, Virginia. And you'll have to pardon me for being in my car, but I found out about 10 minutes before we were going to speak that all the power was going out in my office. So I started getting involved with Student Voice through some of the consultants that we work with with our PBIS initiative. And actually, I'm really tickled because one of the students in our first session that we ever did, Brennan Metz, is on here today. So I'm super excited about that. But one of the things that we did once I started hearing about student voice, I was like, how can we make this work? Because in reality, it's hard to get kids out of class. They've got to worry about the curriculum and all the stuff they're accountable for. Plus, our kids are really busy kids. And then how do we reinforce them and reward them for coming? And we don't have funding to pay students, but we do give them pizza, which I found is probably the best thing that we've been able to do. So the first year, and we've been doing this work for about 3 years now. The first year we got together, we pulled in 2 high schools and 2 middle schools, and they all had about 25 students from each school. And we did not let the principals pick who got to join our group, because principals like to spotlight and like things to be perfect. And we wanted kids that got in trouble, kids that didn't get in trouble, kids in different grade levels, all sexes, all areas represented, students of color, students not of color. And so we let some of our counselors pick the kids, and then we did not allow the old people. And when I say old, I know really I'm not old, but anybody outside of our high schools is, in my mind, considered old when we're doing student youth voice. And so we did not let the schools participate because we wanted our kids to be able to be real open and honest with us. And when we first did that, we have a survey that we give to all of our middle and high school kids every year. It's called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And we've got a lot of longitudinal data, and we collect that data as the old people, but our kids, I don't think ever see that data or look through that data. So when we get together, one of the first things we do is show the kids the data from their school. And it's about substance abuse, bullying, all the hotspot areas that you can think about. And so they look at their data. And then we also, since we're in Virginia, our Department of Ed, they do a survey every year. 1 year is middle, 1 year is high school. And kids answer this climate survey, and then all the staff answer the survey. And their questions are really similar. So we have our kids also look at that data and then compare the answers from our students and our teachers. And what we found was somewhat interesting, because our teachers said, oh yeah, like 40% of the kids would come to us if they were being bullied, and about 10% of the kids said they would. So you can really see where the disconnect is from the adults versus the youth. So we had kids determine what they were most proud of in their schools, what they were most concerned with, and then brainstorming ideas with us. At the high school level, every single student group that we've worked with at the high school level is worried about youth suicide. And what we found when we looked at the data, one of the schools said, our suicide rates and thoughts of suicide are even higher than the state average. So that what our kids don't see is what happens after these meetings, because after these meetings, we take that, and from that, we were able to implement a Signs of Suicide program. And we started it at the 8th grade level. And the year we started, we had a 7th grader who committed suicide. So since then, we've taken it down to the 7th grade level. And so the work that they're doing, we really are listening. And this year, we expanded to elementary schools, which was really scary for me because I was always a middle school teacher and middle school principal. And when we did, what I found is their voice is just as profound as the voices from our middle and high school kids. They were able, they are such creative thinkers. And one school, they were upset that they didn't do more for the community. They didn't have a recycling program. Another kiddo, I believe he was in 2nd grade, said, we should never know who the favorite kids are for our teachers. And sometimes we know who their favorites are, and every kid should be a teacher's favorite. So from that, we try to take videos for the kids that are comfortable with that. And then we take it back and share it with their staff, because I can say a lot of things, but it doesn't mean near as much until they hear it from you all, from your voice. And from there, we come up with action plans in our schools. So some of the things we've addressed this year, we had a great, really diverse group at one of our high schools. And I lead our equity work in our division. And so we asked the kids, and this was what was so moving to me. I said, have you ever been discriminated against? Tell me what goes on. And we had one of our kids that said, yes, not here, but in middle school, somebody used a racial slur. And I said, well, help me understand, how do you think teachers should respond to that? And he didn't say anything. I was like, what do you mean you're not saying anything? And I try to listen, and it's really hard for me because I talk a lot. But he said, well, it just depends. And I said, well, what does it depend on? And he said, if it was Ms. Such and such, I would want her to talk to me. And the person he was referring to happened to be African American. And I just lay it out. I don't mince my words. And I said, so is it different for me being a white person versus someone being African American talking to you about being called a racial slur? And he said, yeah, exactly. And from that, I was like, that's so profound, because from that, we're working now. One of our big pieces in the HR department that's under my umbrella in our division is recruitment and retention of minority staff members, because it's important for kids to have staff members that look like them, that understand them in ways that other staff might not be able to. We also had our kids making comments. We read a lot of novels in high school, and a lot of them still have racial slurs in them, and they're classics. Well, what the kids have said is, if you want us to understand something, why do we have to read a book that has those words in there? Why can't we read another book to get the point across? Classics sometimes can be a little bit boring. And so from that, we're really working hard with our instructional team. So what you all are saying, and when you all are speaking up, it is so profound. And me just listening in here today, the things you all are saying and doing to advocate for yourselves are absolutely amazing. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat, as well as a link to a PowerPoint we've done before that has some pictures and videos, and a couple YouTube links, so you all, at your leisure, can listen to that. But the most important part of us talking is Rachel. And I know Rachel, my daughter took piano lessons, and that's where I met Rachel, because I guess somehow we always went after you or before you, so we got to know each other. And then I show up to a school play, and there's Rachel with one of the parts. And so Rachel and I happened to be in a meeting together this past year, and I was talking about the work we're doing with equity. And I said, we would love for our students to have more of a voice in that, because that's a piece we haven't worked on directly with students. And so Rachel has reached out, and Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you take it.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Mcclung. Well, hi guys, my name is Rachel. I'm a rising senior in Roanoke, Virginia, and I've been working with Dr. Mcclung for the past year and a half now on previously stuff related with our PBIS program. But now we are currently working on developing an equity program at our schools, focusing on students who are marginalized and just overall underrepresented within our schools. And this is going to be primarily high school and middle school. And I think something just like great about not only Dr. Mcclung, but our new equity director that we have as well, is that I've been able to voice my concerns, and not only my concerns, but my friends who are also people of color and a part of the LGBTQIA community. And I've never felt I've always been affirmed. And I think that's something that if you take anything from this session, just making sure that your students are heard, and that they don't feel as though you're maybe not listening to them, or you feel as though their ideas or opinions aren't as important. So for the past, I guess since like April or so, I've been working with her along with our equity director and other principals around the county, just to develop this. And I'm really excited for what we have in store.
And what Rachel's not saying is adults have control problems. We don't like to give up the control over meetings. And when we first had our meeting with Rachel, she laid out the outline, and I said, what do you need us to do? And she's like, here's your list, and I'll let you know when I need you. And so thankfully, with the work we've done, we've worked together. I have faith that she's going to make this work so much better for our kids than if I was running this or our director of equity, and she's taken off. And so our job is to support Rachel and the team. And so we're going to do a lot of great things with that. So you're not giving yourself enough credit, Rachel.
I want to thank you both so much, Rachel and Dr. Mcclung, for being here, for sharing that example. I think you just saw three, and I'll take you out of the spotlight so you don't have to feel like you're in the spotlight. Three great examples and different examples of how youth and adults can partner together. And I know that we need to wrap our session because we're getting towards the end here for today. So I just want to create a little bit of a bridge from the what. We started with the why. And then we went into some examples of what are the possibilities for partnership, what can it look like, and we know there's so many more examples that many of us on this Zoom have engaged in or are engaged in. And now, how do you get there? So what I just dropped in the chat is what we call the roadmap to agency, and I'm just gonna bring this up for one moment. And then I'll take it back down. But on the roadmap, the place to start is really looking at what you think about what young people and what youth and what adults bring to a situation. And so you really need to begin by looking at your mental models, is what we call them. And that's what we think and believe. And that can be the hardest part to change. And after you've done some thinking about that, where you are in this continuum right now and how you can move yourself further along, the next thing to consider is the power dynamics. And this is what we call setting the stage. Both the way that you think about partnership between youth and adults and the power dynamics, so the mental models and power dynamics, really need to be the first areas that change before there can be shared decision making and shared voice, because it takes time to have to change your mental models. So if we had time to get into our breakout rooms again, we were going to ask you to think about these questions with the roadmap, where your school or organization is in regards to mental models and power dynamics. What's the next step for your work and why? And then one thing that you're already doing and one thing you want to do next. But we definitely wanted to leave you with the roadmap. And we're also going to leave you with one more tool, because the roadmap provides some of the theoretical thinking around partnership. And this is 64 ways to amplify youth voice. And this gives you some of the practical, so some of the practice. I know that we need to wrap, and apologies for going over time. But happy to take any kind of questions in the chat as folks are closing. Thank you all so much for having Mira and Anna and Harry and myself here today.